If there is one thing that football fans are obsessed with, other than transfer rumours and reading far too much into pre-season friendlies, it must surely be one-season wonders. For one reason or another, footballers who burn bright, but only for a very brief period of time, seem to really capture the public's imagination. And just when you thought that the subject had been well and truly done to death, your old pal Alfie Potshamer is here to tell you that actually it hasn't. A strange phenomenon that I noticed when it comes to players who are most frequently cited as having been one-season wonders is that they almost all played in about a 5-year period between the end of the 2000s and the early 2010s. And they tend to be extremely Premier League-centric. I have countered both of those problems by limiting myself to just one-season wonder from every one of world football's last 20 seasons, and I've tried to broaden my horizons beyond just English football's top flight. As it turns out, that was extremely difficult, and the amount of time that it took me to research this is about as unjustifiable as the number of hours that I spent playing Football Manager 2010. But hopefully you enjoyed this, just as much as I enjoyed taking Notts County into the Champions League. And without sounding too much like Jay off the In-Betweeners, that is actually something I did, and yes, it is still on my CV. Here are the biggest, best, greatest, or at the very least, the most notable one-season wonders from every one of the last 20 seasons. 2001-02, Michael Ricketts. Frequently cited as having been one of the worst players to have ever played for England, with the right training, commitment, and good fortune, I do actually think Michael Ricketts could have developed into a forward who was good enough to play for England. His solitary cap for the Three Lions against the Netherlands came during his brilliant breakout campaign in the Premier League, but sadly, that would be as good as things would get for the Birmingham-born frontman. Brilliant in one-on-one situations, Ricketts had scored the goals which fired Bolton Wanderers to promotion to the Premier League, and in that 2001-02 season, he scored 15 goals in all competitions, 12 of which came in the Premier League. He made a similarly bright start to the following season, but after a £3.5 million mid-season move to Middlesbrough, he was never the same player again. Ricketts managed just 4 goals in 39 games in the North East, and the only time he ever hit double figures again was at Walsall in League One. 2002-03, Hakan Yakin. He may only be our second inclusion, but you would have to put good money on no one with a better name featuring in this list than Hakan Yakin. Whilst Yakin was obviously a very capable footballer, as is illustrated by the fact that he won 87 caps for Switzerland, he did enjoy one season that was head and shoulders above all the rest. Having had a few impressive seasons in Switzerland, in the 2002-03 campaign, Yakin not only scored 17 goals and made 17 assists, he also played a starring role as Basel qualified from the first group stage of the UEFA Champions League ahead of Liverpool, before earning results against Deportivo La Coruña, Manchester United, and Juventus in the second round. Yakin's sensational form earned him a move to PSG, but the Parisians cancelled his transfer shortly afterwards, claiming that they had been misled about the player's injury status. Yakin subsequently had disappointing stints at both Stuttgart and Galatasaray, and whilst he impressed following a return to Switzerland, never to the extent, or on the same stage, as he had done in his stunning 02-03 campaign. 2003-04, Mista. Probably the second most famous one-season wonder in the history of Spanish football, with the most famous one still to come, Spanish centre-forward Mista enjoyed an unforgettable 2003-04 season. In what was only his third season playing for Valencia, Mista won his second La Liga title, and unlike the first time around, when he only scored 5 goals, this time he would be Rafa Benitez's most prolific marksman. In 45 appearances, he scored 24 goals and made 5 assists, with 19 of those goals coming in just 33 La Liga outings. Brazilian internationals Ronaldo and Julio Baptista, at Real Madrid and Sevilla respectively, were the only players to score more goals than him in the top flight of Spanish football that season. And when the campaign came to an end, Meester turned down Valencia's contract offer to him amid widespread interest. The following season, he failed to hit double figures before signing for Atletico Madrid. In 35 La Liga outings for Atletico, Meester scored just 3 goals before scuttling off to Deportivo La Coruña and finally Toronto FC, hanging up his boots at the age of only 31, a nailed-on inclusion. 2004-05, Valery Bozhinov. The first player in this video who is still active, Valery Bozhinov is a man who could have achieved almost anything that he wanted in football, and he looked as though he had the world at his feet in the 2004-05 season. Starring for Lecce in a season which he began as just an 18-year-old, the Bulgarian fired home 14 goals in only 23 games. That was more goals than Francesco Totti and Hernan Crespo managed in the top flight of Italian football that season. It demanded a transfer, and sure enough, Bozhinov joined Fiorentina for more than £12 million that summer. The club from Florence had hoped to make Bozhinov their main man up front, but they would soon discover that, whilst he lacked little in the way of ability, his attitude could be questionable at times. And I am being extremely charitable in that assessment. Bozhinov went on to spend time with the likes of Juventus, Manchester City, and Sporting Club de Portugal, all of whom, wrongly, felt that they could get a tune out of him. He barely played, let alone scored, for almost all of them. And now aged 36, he scored once in 12 games in the second tier of Bulgarian football last season. 2005-06, Collins John. Born in Liberia, Collins John broke into the FC Twente team as a 17-year-old. His first season and a half attracted the interest of Fulham, Manchester City, and PSV, and the young forward was convinced to sign for the Cottagers following a phone call from Edwin van der Sar. Despite making a bright start, John's first full season in West London was a difficult one. Inevitably, I suppose, for a man of his age, and he only managed to score 4 goals. However, in the 2005-06 campaign, he came alive, finding the back of the net 11 times in the Premier League and 12 times in all competitions, despite only actually starting in 15 out of the 37 games in which he appeared. John was Fulham's top scorer as the club finished 12th in the Premier League, but the following season, manager Chris Coleman was sacked and replaced by Lawrie Sanchez, who didn't fancy him. His next 6 moves were all complete disasters, as John went on a journey from the United States to Iran, among many others, before ending up at Barnet, aged only 26. He retired in 2014, following a brief stint with the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. 2006-07, AFONSO ALVES. A man who still makes Middlesbrough fans shudder in their sleep, AFONSO ALVES set Borough back a massive €12 million in January 2008, and he would go on to do severe damage to the reputation of Eredivisie forwards. Fairly prolific during his time in Sweden, it was at Hoffenheim where Alves scored a quite incredible 48 goals in just 50 games that he earned comparisons with former Brazilian greats to have graced the Eredivisie like Ronaldo and Romario. In fairness, Alves did score 6 goals in 14 games in his first half season at the Riverside, but 5 of those goals did come in just 2 games against Manchester City and Manchester United, the first of which being that famous 8-1 demolition job. In his only full season at Borough, Alves scored just 4 in 31 in the Premier League as the club was relegated, departing in a move to Al Sadd of Qatar. He only played about 40 more games after that, before retiring in 2013, aged 31. 2007-08, Dani Guisa. The greatest one-season wonder of all time, it could be said, Dani Guisa's 2007-08 season came like a bolt out of the blue. Having previously struggled at Mallorca before being forced to drop down into the Segunda Division, Guisa bounced back to the top flight with Getafe, with his goals convincing Mallorca that they should bring him back to the club. It would prove to be a wise decision. That season, Guisa scored 29 in 40 in all competitions and 27 in 37 in La Liga, comfortably taking home the league's golden boot. There was mass speculation about where Guisa would end up following his spectacular campaign, and also a certain amount of shock when he ended up at Fenerbahce. The Turkish Giants were a much better team then than they are now, but it wasn't Manchester United or Real Madrid. In 2 seasons in Turkey, Guisa scored 35 goals in 98 games before rejoining Getafe, where he managed just 3 in 34. He still plays now, aged 41, in the 4th tier of Spanish football, where he presumably spends hours upon hours telling his teammates about the season that he outscored David Villa and Raul. 2008-09, Graffic. If Dani Guisa isn't the greatest one-season wonder of all time, then it is only because the following season there was Graffic. The big Brazilian had always had magic in his boots, but for a single season at Wolfsburg, he briefly became one of the best players on the planet. Having scored 11 goals in his debut campaign in the Bundesliga, Graffic followed that up with 35 goals in 31 games in the 2008-09 season, forming a tremendous strike partnership alongside Edin Dzeko, which propelled Wolfsburg to their first and only Bundesliga title. Whilst Graffic was the star that season, it is Dzeko who went on to enjoy far greater longevity, consistency, and success elsewhere. He was decent over the next 2 seasons, Graffic that is, but nothing like 2008-09. And whilst he went on to score a hatful of goals in the UAE, that isn't quite the same as ripping up the Bundesliga, making Bayern Munich look like amateurs and Philipp Lahm look like Pascal Sagan. 2009-10, Roger Johnson. It was a toss-up between 2 Premier League players for me in the 2009-10 season, namely Cameron Jerome and Roger Johnson. And since forwards dominate this list for fairly obvious reasons, I thought that I would go with Johnson. A brilliant kick-it and head-it style stopper of a centre-back who looked rock solid in a low block, Johnson was signed by Birmingham City following their promotion in 2009, and he enjoyed an outstanding debut campaign in the Premier League. Statistically, Johnson was one of the best defenders in Europe that season, and there was plenty of backlash when Fabio Capello left him out of his World Cup squad despite having an injury crisis at centre-back. Birmingham were relegated the following season, and whilst Johnson was far from being among their worst players, he couldn't live up to his 2009-10 heights. He subsequently joined Wolverhampton Wanderers, where he was utterly dreadful, and I mean seriously one of the worst signings of all time, and within a few years, he was playing for Bromley in the National League. 2010-11, Charlie Adam. Charlie Adam had one very good season at Rangers, an excellent season at Blackpool in the Championship, and 2 or 3 decent seasons at Stoke City. By that logic, you could argue that he isn't a one-season wonder, but at the very highest level, he did have one season that was miles above all the rest. Having played an inspired role in Blackpool's promotion, Adam was outstanding in his first Premier League campaign, scoring 12 goals and making 8 assists from only 35 appearances for the relegated club. Unsurprisingly, Adam was picked up by another Premier League team following that relegation, namely Liverpool, with Alex Ferguson famously commenting that his corners were worth £10 million alone. Things wouldn't really work out for Adam at Anfield, where he spent just a single season, and whilst, like I said, he has had a very decent career, his 2010-11 season was not like any of his others. 2011-12, Antonio Nocerino. Seeing off the competition of Grant Holt and Yunus Belhanda, among others, to take the crown in 2011-12 is Antonio Nocerino. Nocerino never seemed to have too much doubt about his own talents, having been signed by AC Milan as a replacement for Andrea Pirlo, and commenting not long after his arrival in 2011 that he had a better view of the game than Gennaro Gattuso. In his debut campaign, he backed up his talk, scoring 11 goals from central midfield and making the Serie A team of the season. Over the next 2 seasons, Nocerino may well have had a better view of the game than Gattuso, but that was primarily because his view was often from the bench. He never rediscovered the heights that he had reached in the 2011-12 season, and following stints at West Ham, Orlando City, and Benevento, he retired in 2018, aged 33. 2012-13. Michu. A Premier League icon, despite only having one great season in the division, and only actually 1.5 seasons great or otherwise, Michu absolutely lit up English football's top flight during the 2012-13 campaign. Signed by Swansea City following a very impressive season with Rayo Vallecano, that campaign was almost so good in fact that I left him out. There is no doubt that he hit another level in South Wales though, scoring 22 times in 43 games in all competitions, and finishing 5th in the Premier League scoring charts. That record was made all the more impressive since Michu wasn't an out-and-out centre forward. He was really more of a second striker or attacking midfielder, and sticking with the theme of Alex Ferguson quotes, the former Manchester United boss joked that he should have sacked his entire scouting team for not instructing him to sign the Spaniard. Sadly, early on during his second season at Swansea, Michu suffered a horrible ankle injury from which he would never recover, and he was eventually forced into a premature retirement at the age of only 31. 2013-14. Alberto PALOSCHI. I nearly went with Daniel Sturridge for the 2013-14 season, which I am well aware would have been a controversial choice, but there can be no debate about his 2013-14 season having been miles above any other season that he had, even if he was talented enough to have played like that, if not even better than that, for a number of years. Alberto PALOSCHI beats him to the punch though, as someone who was once tipped for greatness as a teenager at AC Milan, where he scored just 17 seconds into his first team debut. It never quite worked out for PALOSCHI at the San Siro, but you could argue that he reached a level not far from greatness in the 2013-14 campaign, when he struck 15 times for Chievo Verona. Without him, the Yellow and Blues would have been relegated that season, and I was surprised at the time that he wasn't able to manufacture a move off the back of it. In January 2016, PALOSCHI did move on, joining Swansea City, where he scored twice in 10 games. At age 32, he now plays for Siena in Serie C. 2014-15. Claudio BEAUVUE. One of the very best inclusions in this list, seeing off the competition of former Chelsea and Wigan Athletic forward Franco Di Santo in the process, Claudio BEAUVUE's 2014-15 season was totally abnormal. Following years floating around in Ligue 2 and the lower reaches of Ligue 1, and fresh off the back of a season in which he had scored 5 goals in the top flight of French football, BEAUVUE turned in a season of the very highest calibre. He scored 27 goals in all competitions, and 17 in Ligue 1 alone during a season in which he played out wide on the left, right, and through the middle. His goals fired Guingamp to a 10th place finish, and they fired him all the way to Lyon in a potential €7.5 million summer move. BEAUVUE was not a total disaster at Lyon, where he scored 8 goals in his only season, but he never seemed to fit in with the way in which Bruno Genesio wanted his side to play. Now aged 34, he currently plays for Bologna, where he was relegated to the 4th tier of French football last season. 2015-16. Borja Baston. There are a disproportionate number of ex-Swansea City players in this list, for some unknown reason, and Borja Baston spent 4 years contracted to the Swans, although he only ever played 39 games for them. He joined Swansea immediately after his mightily impressive 2015-16 campaign, in which he scored 18 goals in La Liga and 19 in all competitions, on loan at Eibar from Atletico Madrid. A former under-17 World Cup Golden Boot winner, it's obvious that Baston knows how to find the back of the net. But now aged 29, his next best top-flight campaign after 2015-16 heralded just 4 goals. Baston has scored plenty of goals outside of the top flight, including last season, when he scored 22 goals for Real Oviedo in the Segunda Division, which was the joint most in the league. Oddly enough, Oviedo, like Swansea, are also a former club of Michu, who was one of a handful of players to lend the club their financial support a few years ago when they were in real trouble. Just a bit of one-season wonder overlap there for you all. 2016-17, KEITA BALDE. Once linked with seemingly every so-called super club in Europe, KEITA BALDE was born in Spain to Senegalese parents, but he began his professional career playing in Italy for Lazio. The 2016-17 season was Balde's fourth and final season in the Italian capital, and it was by far his best, not just at Lazio, but anywhere. Obviously, otherwise, I wouldn't have included him in this video. In 34 games, the leggy wide man, who can also play through the middle, scored 16 goals and made 5 assists. Only 7 players scored more goals than him in Serie A that season, and when the campaign drew to a close, Monaco forked out a whopping €30 million in order to sign him. That fee would not be justified at all, as in, the supposedly inferior league gun, Balde, could only manage 12 goals in 44 games across 2 seasons, before returning to Italy in loan moves to Inter Milan and Sampdoria. Now aged 27, Balde left Monaco to join Cagliari for nothing last summer, and following a single disappointing season in Sardinia, he is now a free agent for the second consecutive summer, recently having been linked with a move to Greek outfit PAOK. 2017-18, PIONE SISTO. I had such high hopes for PIONE SISTO off the back of his 2017-18 season, and long-term subscribers to this channel may recall that I thought that he would be one to watch going into the 2018 World Cup. He wasn't, at all. In fact, he was actually slated by the Danish press for his performances, and nor did he kick on the following season, as I had hoped that he would. Born in Uganda to South Sudanese parents, Sisto made his name with Midtjylland before signing for Celta Vigo in 2016. Following a promising debut campaign, I thought that he was Celta's standout player, other than Iago Aspas, in the 2017-18 season, in which he scored 6 goals and made 9 assists from the left flank. Only Lionel Messi, Pablo Fornals, Luis Suarez and Karim Benzema made more assists in La Liga that season, it is worth pointing out. Following his underwhelming World Cup though, Sisto's confidence looked to have been shot to pieces. His next 2 seasons were a long way short of the form that he had produced in 2017-18, and then in 2020, he returned to Midtjylland for just £2.25 million. 2018-19, Krzysztof Piątek. Even though this was a recent season, and the recent seasons are a little bit stupid because, given the players involved, it is of course quite possible that they could turn out not to be one-season wonders at all, and yes, I did just call part of my own video stupid, there were 3 strong candidates for the 2018-19 season I felt, namely Krzysztof Piątek, Nicola Pepe, and Ryan Fraser. Piątek is the standout candidate as far as I'm concerned, despite having scored at a decent rate for Cracovia in Poland before the 2018-19 campaign. Following a €4 million move to Genoa, Piątek began the season like a house on fire, scoring 4 goals in the space of just 19 minutes on his debut, and 19 goals in 21 games in total in his first half season at the club. That prompted an immediate €35 million move to AC Milan during the January transfer window, representing a remarkable profit for Genoa over such a short period of time, where Piątek would score 11 goals in 21 games, giving him an overall tally of 30 and 42 in his first season playing in Italian football. That is a quite ridiculous output, but it is one that Piątek has sadly come nowhere near replicating in the 3 seasons since. He scored 5 in 20 for AC Milan in the first half of the following season, before being sold to Hertha Berlin, where he has since scored 12 in 54 in the Bundesliga. He returned to Serie A on loan at Fiorentina last season, but he could only manage 3 goals in 14 games in the league. 2019-20, John Lundstrom. quite possibly the greatest fantasy Premier League one-season wonder of all time, I don't think that I am letting my FPL head rule over my real-world perception when I say that John Lundstrom's 2019-20 season was far superior to his other seasons, regardless of how many points he picked up on the game. Having only played 10 games the previous season, as Sheffield United won promotion to the top flight, the former Everton trainee became a key man for Chris Wilder in the top flight. He featured in 34 out of the club's 38 Premier League games, where his industry, running, and 5 goals helped the Blades to a pretty stunning 9th place finish. The following season, his game time reduced significantly as Chris Wilder was sacked towards the back end of a campaign in which Sheffield United finished dead last. Lundstrom joined Rangers last summer on a free transfer where he played 48 times this season as the Scottish Premiership runners-up reached the final of the Europa League. 2020-21. Simi. Although Simeon Takukwu Nwankwo, better known as Simi, only had his one outstanding season during the season before last, I think that it would be reasonable to predict with a certain degree of probability that he will indeed prove to be a bona fide one-season wonder. The giant Nigerian frontman, who stands at just under 2 meters tall, or over 6 foot 6 inches, had spent 2 previous seasons in Serie A playing for Crotone prior to the 2020-21 season, in which he had scored a combined total of 10 goals in 44 games. But having led the club's scoring charts as they were promoted from Serie B the previous season, Siri carried that form over into the top flight, striking 20 times in the league in a single season. That put him level in the Serie A scoring charts with Ciro Immobile, trailing only Cristiano Ronaldo, Romelu Lukaku, Luis Muriel, and Dusan Vlahovic, despite playing for a team that were relegated by Christmas and only won 6 games all season. Simi retained his Serie A status this season despite Crotone's relegation, joining Salernitana on loan, where he scored once in 20 appearances, before joining Parma in Serie B on loan instead in the January, where he scored only 1 goal in 12 games. It is for that reason, aged 30, that it seems unlikely to me that the Nigerian will ever replicate his 2020-21 heroics. 2021-22. Martin Terrier. Given that Martin Terrier is only 25 years old, and he just scored 21 goals and made 7 assists, playing predominantly off the left flank for Rennes, I am not suggesting that he will be a one-season wonder. That would be ridiculous. Just that he is at this moment in time. Previously back to produce a season like the one that he has just done, when he was at Lille and Lyon, Terrier could never quite convert that potential into goal contributions. Hence why Rennes were able to pick him up for just 12 million euros. His 21 league goals this season is a tally which was bettered only by Kylian Mbappe and Wissam Ben Yedder in League 1 this season, and it has seen him linked with summer moves to the likes of Liverpool, Leicester City, West Ham, and Tottenham Hotspur. So that is it for today's video, but honourable mentions go to Roque Santa Cruz in 2007-08, though he was actually quite good for Bayern Munich, he just didn't play enough games or minutes to score the types of numbers that he hit that season at Blackburn Rovers. Stephen Ireland in 2008-09, Florian Thauvin in 2017-18, since whilst he has had other good seasons at Marseille, that one was off the charts, and arguably, perhaps somewhat controversially at this stage, I think you could make a case, maybe, you can see that I am a bit tentative with this one, but a case for Çağlar Söyüncü in the 2019-20 campaign, who I like a lot, but it must be said, he hasn't reached the PFA Team of the Year worthy heights that he hit that season since, so whilst it would still be a stretch to call him a one-season wonder, hence why he didn't feature, I thought that he was an interesting honourable mention. The others were interspersed throughout, the other honourable mentions that is, but I thought that I'd give a nod to those guys who were as yet unmentioned. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video, I sincerely hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on social media, either on Twitter or on Instagram, via the username at HITC Sevens, should you wish to do so.